If you've been watching my channel for a little while, you'll know that I'm not a Linux user anymore, or if you read my blog, I've written about it, but I'd like to set it straight today. I am not a Linux user. I am a BSD user, or any other Unix or Unix-like, Unix-based operating system. I haven't used anything like Solaris or Haiku yet, but I plan to in the future, just to test them out, see what they do. But I am primarily an OpenBSD and FreeBSD user. Now, why is this? Well, today I like to compare the differences between Linux, OpenBSD, and FreeBSD and explain why I like and dislike each one, as well as their advantages and disadvantages from an objective viewpoint. So let's get right into the video. Is what I would say actually if there wasn't one thing I had to note before, and that's that my channel had a random massive growth. I mean, I was at 115 subscribers or something like that on like Friday, and then on Saturday I surpassed 200. I think it was Saturday night. So I got a lot more subscribers. Right now I have like 250 something, and that's as of recording this video. I've gotten a huge growth on my channel. I got way more views this month than I've ever gotten in any other month. I got like, I don't remember what it was, but it was some like large number. It was like 1,000 something, I think. And that's just the kind of growth, I guess, that encourages me to make videos. So I'm going to move to a weekly upload schedule, I think. I'm not sure yet. Depends on how much motivation I have to actually produce videos. And I just checked just now, and it is showing me that I have gotten 1,689 views in the past 48 hours and 2,480 views over the past 28 days. So you can see that the majority of my views have come from the past like 2 days, which is quite frankly crazy. And I think that's because Mental Outlaw dropped a OpenBSD video about OpenBSD 7.2, got people to start searching for OpenBSD on YouTube, found me, and the rest is history. So aside from all that, which I guess I kind of talked about that for a little bit too long, let's just get right into the video. So let's talk about why I like Linux. So Linux, obviously, it's going to have a lot of software because it's the most popular option out there when it comes to Unix-like systems. So it has the best software availability, and because of that, you can get it from many different sources, hence the reason for package managers. And the difference between distributions isn't a lot. Really, the only difference between distributions is the version of software that's on it and the packages that come installed and the package repositories. And because of the various different package managers that people have written, there's a lot of decentralization in Linux. And a lot of people love decentralization. Now, I personally am not a fan of decentralization, which I'll get into that in a bit, at least when it comes to my operating system or package repositories. When it comes to things like social media, I'm not a big social media kind of guy, but I think things like PeerTube or what's the other thing, Mastodon, I think things like those are good. Decentralized platforms like that, those things are good, but I don't want my operating system to be decentralized. I'll get into why in a minute. And there's good support depending on the distribution. Like if you have errors, there's things, you can find amazing support. I know Arch Linux has amazing support. There's an amazing forum. The Arch Wiki is extremely well documented. You can really just Google any error you're getting and you'll find people that solved it like 8 years ago. Sometimes I'll have a problem on a BSD and I'll search up the answer and I'll find it on one of the Arch Linux forums, but they have solved it back in like 2008. But the solution still works, so if it's not broken, then don't fix it, right? So those are the things that I like about Linux. Not very many. It's the kind of thing where decentralization actually hurts it. And this is what I'm going to talk about when it comes to OS decentralization, because it makes it harder for standards like the XDG desktop specifications. Standards like that makes it harder for like a large operating system like that where it's all decentralized and everybody can do anything. And yes, I know Linux is a kernel, not an operating system. I'm using them synonymously because I want my viewer base to see the videos as more accessible. I don't want to get into all the differences and stuff. Anyways, as I was saying, it makes it harder for standards to be adopted because let's say Arch Linux wants to adopt a certain directory specification standard, but Ubuntu doesn't. Well, they're both going to do different things, and so if you try and find information online about Linux itself, you're not going to find Linux information. You're going to find information about Fedora, Mint, Ubuntu, Red Hat, Arch, and all the other distributions. I mean, I can't really think of many more off the top of my head. I'm not particularly a Linux user. Gentoo. I love Gentoo. I think out of all Linux distributions, Artix and Gentoo are my two favorites. I used Gentoo briefly a long time ago. Let's not talk about it. But Artix was my go-to for actually a very long time on my laptop and my desktop. Anyways, let's continue. So when I was talking about solutions that you find online, because of the decentralization, you might find a solution that works for you on Arch, and like if you have an error, you can find on the Arch forums, see, oh wow, this solution worked for me. But if you have the same error on Ubuntu, it might be different because there's different like tool chains and different package manager. Like I said, that's the main difference between actual distributions, and you could find errors that just simply they're not like cross-platform or whatever the word for that would be. So I think that's a main reason why I stopped using Linux, because if you try and find help online, it's so far and few between to find help that actually works for the specific distribution you're on. If you're having a distribution specific issue, if you're just having an issue with like general like core utils or something, then it'll be completely fine. But if you're having a very distribution specific issue and it's not well documented, chances are you're not really going to be able to find a great fix for it. And so the next thing that I want to talk about is trends. Now, I'm not a person that's very up with trends, okay? If you know anything about me, if you know me in real life, I don't really like following trends. I think trends are quite honestly ridiculous most of the time, and honestly, there's no point for them. People are just doing things because everybody else is doing them. I mean, what are you, a sheep? Anyways, I know people are always talking about like the sheeple memes and stuff, but I feel like unironically people actually do act like that. So that's a little weird. So with Linux, what I see a lot of trendy things. Like you see things like Wayland, Snaps, Flatpak, Rust. I hate Rust. I have a video coming about why I hate the Rust programming language. The programming language itself isn't actually even that bad. It's the way people implement it and the users that make me so mad that I literally can't even bring myself to actually learn it. I thought about learning before, but it's just, no. I'd rather learn C, which I am actually in the process of slowly learning. And let's see, the next thing that I don't like about Linux is the fact that it requires hardening. And it's fairly simple. If you don't know, hardening is basically the process of making your system like more airtight, secure to vulnerabilities and stuff, just to make sure that people aren't going to like take care or exploit things in your system. And I don't really like the process of hardening. I used the Gentoo hardened like ISO or whatever. There was a version that was like pre-hardened for you. That was nice, but a lot of distributions don't offer that, so you have to harden your system yourself. And I find that to be honestly quite tedious. You can find like scripts out there and stuff, but none of them are complete, and some of them don't work on certain platforms, and it's just a whole mess because of the decentralization of Linux and whatnot. And the last reason that I don't like Linux is because many distribution package repos actually aren't even up to date. If you try and install packages on like Debian, well, don't even try and use any sort of latest feature. You might as well just compile the source from yourself, because they're not going to have up-to-date packages. I even find on Ubuntu and Mint that they're not having the latest packages. I mean, I can find versions of software that came out maybe even 2 years ago that won't be in the Ubuntu or Mint package repositories. They will be in the Arch repositories, because that's kind of the whole shtick of Arch, and Gentoo compiles from the latest source code anyway. Well, I don't think it compiles from the master branch of the Git repository, but it'll take like version to tarballs and compile from that. So you're going to get up-to-date software on Gentoo as well. But you'll find that a lot of package repositories simply don't have the best software, and sometimes they're compiled with options where, quite frankly, they're not sane for the normal user, so you have to recompile it yourself with extra options and whatnot. And the normal user isn't going to want to do that. They're not going to have the capability to do that. They probably wouldn't even know how to run make. So that's the end of what I have to say about Linux. So let's go on to OpenBSD. So like my last point, the second to last point in Linux, OpenBSD is actually very secure by design, and there is no need to really harden it at all. I mean, you can harden it. There are certain things that you can do to increase the security on your system, but having the base system is pretty much you're good to go. Everything is extremely simple to install on OpenBSD. When you first boot up the ISO or the image file, all you have to do is hit the I key, you hit install. It's a TTY installation, but it's not like you're typing all the commands in yourself. It has a script that does everything for you. It's like Arch install, except it was like way before BSD install has been around like forever, as far as I know. And so it's extremely simple to install. Like I said, all you have to do is go through the process. It literally hand holds you through everything. It partitions your disk and everything for you. And everything really just works. And I know that's such a phrase that's like overused. Oh, it just works. But with OpenBSD, everything really does just work. And if you want to change something, it's usually pretty trivial. And any kind of like patches or anything that you want to implement, they're trivial to implement as well. And that is because the ports system, you can compile pretty much all of your packages from their source code because of the port system. I mean, you could do it without the port system, but the port system streamlines the process of compiling packages. You can edit the source code, patch them, and you can actually submit forks of the packages in the ports tree to the upstream ports tree, or you can choose not to and just keep them on your own personal Git repository. I'll put in the link actually two links, or I'll put in the description 2 links to my personal ports trees for OpenBSD and FreeBSD. The BSD systems are known for their ports, and Gentoo, the Portage package manager, I mean, it's called Portage. It's actually based on the concept of the BSD port systems. So that's actually very nice. That's one reason why I liked Gentoo. And so let's go on to the next subject about OpenBSD, and that's about vulnerabilities. You're not going to find a lot of vulnerabilities in OpenBSD, but when they do arise, they're usually patched fairly quickly. With hyperthreading, there still is a huge vulnerability with hyperthreading. So hyperthreading is disabled by default on OpenBSD. Now, I wanted better performance out of my system, and the likelihood of somebody actually exploiting the hyperthreading exploit on my machine, I found it to be very low, and my security model, my threat model, it didn't really prove to me that disabling hyperthreading was going to be for the best, so I enabled it. You can enable it, unlike Bluetooth. Bluetooth has so many vulnerabilities that OpenBSD simply just does not have Bluetooth, and that might be because there's a lot of vulnerabilities, might be because there is just no really demand for Bluetooth. In OpenBSD, the users probably aren't using any kind of Bluetooth devices whatsoever. I have a pair of Bluetooth headphones, but even I don't use the Bluetooth on them very often, only if I'm going on like a walk or something, and I just don't want to have to deal with the cords. And speaking of no Bluetooth, Bluetooth is actually extremely, I guess, bloated or whatever. It's hard to implement in a system in a minimal way, and OpenBSD itself is actually extremely minimal by design, and many updates actually make the code base smaller so that it becomes more minimal rather than bigger, which you see with Linux. The Linux kernel is actually huge. I mean, something like 400, 500 megabytes at this point, at least from what I've seen. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But Linux kernel updates, if you're trying to update the Linux kernel, well, if you have a slow connection, good luck. It's going to take you a long time. That's one of the main reasons I actually moved away from Linux, because I didn't like having to update my kernel so often, but if I wanted security fixes, I needed to do it. So OpenBSD, and I guess I keep jumping from topic to topic, but you'll get the point. You'll see, all the positives and negatives of OpenBSD, Linux, FreeBSD. So OpenBSD, it has outstanding documentation. It's actually been praised for its in-depth documentation. Every man page is complete. They're all up to date, and every time you submit like a patch or something to OpenBSD, they require you to update the relevant man page as long as you've actually changed something that would be in the man page, because they want the documentation to be that up to date. And the last positive that I have for OpenBSD is code of conducts. Now, if you read my blog, you'd know that one of my very first posts was actually about why I hate codes of conduct, or code of conducts, whatever. And I hate them because I think they kind of diminish the value of free speech that we have simply from the nature of being online. And they're oftentimes very restrictive in what you can and cannot say, and they don't make sense and sometimes contradict themselves, and overall, there's just no point in having them. So OpenBSD is like, they have no code of conduct. The only code of conduct that they have is the rules for their mailing list, and I wouldn't even call that a code of conduct. It's more just, hey, here's how to be a decent person online and interact in a sophisticated manner. So that's the last positive I have for OpenBSD. The first negative, one of three, because I don't really find many, is that there is a slow package manager. And if I have any complaints about OpenBSD, if you ask me for my main one, this is the complaint. The package manager is so slow, especially because it's written in Perl, which is a scripting language. It's interpreted. And the fact that I have a slow internet connection oftentimes probably doesn't help it either. I could try and install a package, and it could be very small. It could be a 400 kilobyte install, like a 400 kilobyte tarball that just extracts a binary and installs it. But it could take me maybe a minute to download it, just because it has to go and query the package database, has to grab the tarball, and I don't even know what takes it so long, to be honest. I could probably like go to the package database myself, get the link, curl it, and then run whatever install script is used to install it to the system. I have no idea what takes it so long, but if they increase the speed of the package manager, I might go back to primarily using OpenBSD. I switched to FreeBSD for pretty much that exact reason, and a few others which I'll get into when I get to the positives of FreeBSD. So the next thing is that OpenBSD, if you like Bluetooth, it doesn't have it. So I wrote it down as a negative just in case I forgot to mention it as a positive. If you like Bluetooth, you're not going to get it on OpenBSD. Now you can get a little adapter where it will basically plug into your auxiliary port on your computer, and then that little dongle, it'll connect to your Bluetooth headphones, and then you can use Bluetooth, and you don't really have to worry about it, but that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to convince the OpenBSD developers to add Bluetooth, and even if you wrote an entire Bluetooth system yourself, you probably wouldn't even be able to get it merged, so don't even try. And the last thing about OpenBSD is, to my knowledge, there is no compatibility with Linux binaries. Now, FreeBSD has an option to let you run Linux binaries, unmodified Linux binaries, no difference. You can grab one from Linux, run it on FreeBSD. You can just execute it right then and there. Now, you have to enable it in the kernel, but it's not too much of a hassle to do. It's like 2 commands to do. With OpenBSD, there's no support for that. Now, I try to stay away from as much proprietary software as I can, and since using OpenBSD, I haven't used any proprietary software besides whatever Intel management engine or whatever is on my ThinkPad T420. That's uncontrollable, but on my operating system myself, I have chosen not to install any proprietary software. Now, if you wanted to try and use proprietary software, then this would be good for you, because a lot of the time, websites, if they're providing a binary and they're only providing a binary for their packages or their programs, then it's going to be macOS, Windows, and Linux. And Linux binaries, they're not going to work on OpenBSD. If you try and execute them, it'll just say exec format error or something like that. Despite using the ELF format, it's still going to be, there's going to be differences. And that is actually the last thing I have for OpenBSD, so let's go into FreeBSD. Now, I don't have many things to say because FreeBSD and OpenBSD are actually very similar. However, the biggest thing that I like about FreeBSD is the package manager, PKG. And now the OpenBSD package manager is also called PKG, so don't get them confused. But The OpenBSD package manager splits its commands into multiple ones. So there's pkg underscore add, pkg underscore info, and those are two separate commands. With FreeBSD, it's pkg space, so everything is invoked by one command, pkg, and then all of the other commands are like separate and they fall under the single pkg command. So it's all programmed into one binary, and it's very fast. I'm not sure what it's written in, but if I had to suspect something, it would probably be C. If it's written in anything else, then I am amazed, because it is actually extremely fast, and I have no idea why it's so fast. It just is. Gets everything done way faster for me. I can install a package in maybe less than 10 seconds. The same package on OpenBSD, I could install it on FreeBSD way faster. The second thing is that there's a huge community of FreeBSD users. I think FreeBSD has way more users than OpenBSD. I'm pretty sure of this. The forums, I think they're called the Daemon forums, those have tons of users, tons of solutions to old problems that you can still find today, like I said with the Arch forums earlier, and it's just overall a huge support community. And the software availability, it's actually the same as OpenBSD. However, the binary package repositories and the ports trees actually they both have more software than OpenBSD's binary package repos and ports trees. Now, this isn't really an issue if you're an advanced user, because you can just compile your software yourself. You can make files for the ports tree yourself. It's not very complicated to do. But if you're a beginning user, I would definitely recommend using FreeBSD before OpenBSD. Now, I kind of went backwards because I wanted more of the just works kind of mentality. I don't want to tinker on my computer all the time. I want to be able to set it and forget it. That's kind of my motto. Now, if I want to toy around with things, OpenBSD is the way to go. But if you want to get a beginner BSD system, I definitely recommend FreeBSD as the first one. And the fourth positive that I have about FreeBSD is it has Bluetooth, if that's your thing. I don't really like Bluetooth, so I also find that to be a negative. And if we talk about the other negative that I have, because I only have two negatives for FreeBSD, it's that it has a code of conduct. And I've already iterated over it. I'm not going to say it again. I don't like code of conducts. That's really the only two reasons that I don't like FreeBSD, which is why I switched to it. It has less negatives than OpenBSD, at least in my opinion. I feel like it might be, well, actually, I'll add another negative that I didn't really write down or think about before, but it's less minimal of a system. I talked about how OpenBSD is very minimal before. If I'm sitting on my DWM build and I have no terminal windows open or nothing, just my standard services running in the background and whatnot, I can average 80 to 90 megabytes of RAM at idle, no terminals open or anything. If I open up FreeBSD though, I'm going to be averaging around 200 megabytes of RAM. Now, this isn't even close to the 300-400 that I'd be getting on Linux. I'm still very glad that FreeBSD allows me to be more minimal, but if you want the most minimal system that you can get, I'd say OpenBSD is probably the way to go. So that's I guess the end of the video. I'm not trying to hate on Linux, I'm not trying to hate on OpenBSD, I'm not trying to hate on FreeBSD. They all have their positives and negatives, they all have their use cases and scenarios. But I think if I had to choose out of all of them, I would choose FreeBSD. If OpenBSD got a faster package manager, I'd definitely go right back to OpenBSD. So that's basically the end of the video. I like all Unix likes, and they all have their own use cases. Like I said, well, I'm just repeating myself at this point, so I'm going to end the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope that I can get a video out next Sunday.